Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to paint a pine tree forest with a wet rainy road. I'm going to go ahead and list the colors that I used for this. This will be a time-lapse painting. I'm just going to go ahead and mix up a light gray color for the very background here for where the fog is going to be going. I'm using a small fan brush to put in these back trees. So the very top is going to be very foggy, so as I move down I'm going to incorporate more color, and I'm using Hooker's green and a little bit of the yellow ochre. And I'm just putting it in random areas down below, kind of mixing it up. And then I added a little bit of red to the yellow ochre just to kind of give a little bit more of a color variation. To put too much detail on this, it is going to be covered up with some more fog later on, and also these are the farthest trees, so not too much detail. I used red, cerulean blue, and a touch of black, and I'm using a small flat brush to create the farthest point of the road, and as I get closer to myself I'm just widening that up. I like the look of the purple road with a little bit more purple than black and gray tones, just because the purple that we mix up is going to complement the yellow ochre within the trees. So the black areas that I'm putting in are basically going to act as the puddles in the road. And anytime that you're putting puddles in a road or street or anything like that, or sidewalk, you want to make sure that you're kind of outlining those puddles with a little bit lighter of a color. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up some white and kind of start outlining some of the black areas that I put in. And I will kind of keep coming back and forth to this area and touching things up as I move along. But you just want to have that general concept in mind of just kind of outlining the black areas. Sometimes what I'll do is I will take my brush and kind of pull down a little bit to kind of give the illusion of some reflections. So I've got a bigger fan brush and I am using some of that Hooker's green, and I'm just kind of going through and covering up most of this the rest of the canvas that I don't have color on, just to have a good base to start putting in my pine trees. I'm switching to a larger flat brush here, and I'm going to go ahead and start taking black and I'm not over mixing my colors. I'm putting a little bit of that yellow ochre, Hooker's green, and black in there, and I'm just swiping up and just not over blending, but you do want that color variation in there. We are going to cover most of this up with leaves, but I just wanted to have a good base and kind of an idea of the colors that I wanted to incorporate into the painting. So this is kind of me just trying to test out the colors and see like what I want to have where, and so that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm just mixing up some more of that purple color for the road, and I'm just trying to touch up the road a little bit more. I'm adding some more puddles with the black. And I tried to focus on making my puddles closer, obviously larger in size, to help give the illusion of perspective on the road. I'm just going through and outlining some more of that black. I'm adding another puddle in right here. The nice thing about this is you can't really mess it up, just as long as you kind of follow that pattern, you'll be fine, and you can then incorporate any type of color that you want. If you want different colored trees, you can put different colored trees in and drag those into the reflection area as well, which is what I will be doing here later on. I'm going to do it a little bit right now where I'm just dragging some of that yellow ochre, because I'm going to be putting some yellow ochre through the pine trees. So as I start putting in my trees, I'm going to be switching back and forth from the brush that I'm using right now, which is the feathered rake brush, which is really nice for any type of detail. And then I'm going to go ahead and switch from that back to my fan brush when I'm putting the leaves in. And it's just a lot of back and forth detail with the leaves. I haven't really seen Hooker's green used a lot in other tutorials that I've watched, but I decided to get it because I was having some trouble with green. It's a color that I don't really like to use because I feel like I can never get the perfect green. But I really like Hooker's green. It's opaque, and I love olive green too, but the olive green is somewhat transparent and, well, translucent, and it just doesn't really apply very well unless you're mixing it with like a white and lightening it up. So I found that Hooker's green tends to really be a nice color to work with when you're doing darker pine trees and things like that. So this very back portion is still wet, so it wasn't really working very well with me when I was trying to put the fog in. You want it to be somewhat dry when you're doing that, but I decided just to kind of lighten things up and still put the white in there and try to create some distant fog anyhow, and I do end up coming back to this. But right now I'm just putting in yellow ochre and hooker's green with mostly white, and I'm just kind of blotting in some very light distant trees back there and bringing it up further so it looks like there's a big hill of pine trees coming down that are foggy. So I'm just coming back to the road, trying to straighten it up a bit. I've got hooker's green on my brush, and I'm just kind of dragging it outward and just kind of acting as it's, you know, some wet areas in the road there, and it's reflecting some of the green trees. And then of course I'm going to take some of the white paint, and I'm just kind of going around that area as well, taking my finger and kind of just dragging it down. You can use your brush, but I always like to use my finger when I paint. And start working on the side of the road, and I've got yellow ochre and black on my brush. I'm just going to try to add some detail on the sides there. So I just went through with straight black paint and put it in between the lighter area we put in the road, just to kind of give it some more depth and add just a little more interest to it. So I'm just kind of like outlining it kind of in a jagged way, because I want it to look like kind of a beat up road, kind of like a cool hidden path. Let this dry, and I'm coming back to it with some straight white paint on my brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and start putting in some more foggy areas back there, and I'm also going to be adding in some more distant trees. So I've got just a tiny bit of yellow ochre on my fan brush and mostly white. I want these trees to be really light in color. I'm just going to go ahead and put those in certain areas. And I want that back part right at the end of the road to look like almost as if it's lightening up back there. So I switched to my feathered rake brush, and I've got hooker green on my brush, and I'm just very lightly putting in some more distant trees at the end of that road. And as I'm putting these trees in, I'm just dabbing very lightly. Like I said, you don't need a lot of detail. These are distant, so. I'm just trying to put in some tree branches here and there just to kind of see how I like that. And I end up continuing with that farther into the painting. But I'm going to go ahead and start working on the detail of the leaves before I do that. So I'm going to be switching back again, like I said, from my fan brush to this feathered rake brush that I'm using. I'm going to use the feathered rake brush more for the distant trees because it's got very thin, spread out bristles, and the fan brush is better for up close trees, in my opinion. That's kind of how I like to work because it helps me with my depth in the painting. Also, this brush is really good for really tiny lines because it is so thin at the ends and wispy. You can create the most thinnest, nicest lines, especially if you water your paint down a little bit. So I'm going to be using primarily yellow ochre for most of the leaves, but I will be kind of mixing that up into some raw umber and the burnt sienna, and I'll even be putting in black for some shadow areas. So at this point, the back area is completely dry, so I am putting in some more fog. Using a very dry round brush and just doing little circles into the canvas with just straight white paint. So the rest of this is just pretty much working on the details of the trees, and like I said, just keep adding in more and more detail. You can't really put too much in. You can have a really dense forest, or you can have one that's not as dense, and maybe there's just a few trees lining the road, but I wanted to have a lot of trees lining this hidden path. And as long as you're kind of just, like I said, following the rule of thumb of trying to keep your leaves larger and trees taller up close, and you know, kind of laying off on the detail the farther you go, then you'll be fine. And just use some colored variation, you know, use your yellow ochre, maybe mix yellow ochre in with some raw umber or the burnt sienna, or whatever color you want to use, really. So I just kind of go back and forth from adding leaves in, and then I will be adding in some branches. So I'm taking just straight black paint and I'm kind of outlining the edge of this road and kind of pulling up to create some tree branches and tree trunks. It is kind of hard to see. So I've got my fan brush now as I'm moving closer to myself, and these are going to be obviously the bigger trees right out in front, so they're just going to be kind of hanging right out there. I'm mixing up some olive green, some black, white, and a little bit of yellow ochre. It's going to be a really dull grayish color, and I'm going to use that to put in some more branches and tree trunks. And I'm using, again, that feathered rake brush, which is so nice for these small, tiny lines. So I've got just yellow ochre on my brush, and I'm going to go ahead and start putting that in the puddle areas as a reflection from the trees. I did this earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and do it again because I have more of an idea of where the colors are that will be hanging over the puddles. I'm also putting in some more purple in the road. I wanted to kind of make it just a tad more purple, so I put in less black and more red and blue in my mixture that I did from the very beginning to create the road. So the last part of this is just basically me putting on some more details of the leaves, and I'm using straight yellow ochre, and I'm just really trying to bring out the color in those leaves. So that about wraps it up for this one. I know that it wasn't a full-length tutorial, but I still hope that you guys were able to learn something from it, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I hope to see the things that you guys come up with as well, so show me your paintings, and I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video. And also, please remember to subscribe if you guys haven't already, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be alerted of my upcoming videos.